Hi guys, this is Ananya and welcome back to my channel. This is episode 1 of my series on English literature. In this series, we dive deep into literature and books. And today we will discuss the history of English literature. History is crucial in understanding the different periods of literature and how they impacted the writings of that era. Every book and every writer has been influenced by history, politics, economics, and the sociology of that particular era. Hence, it is very important to understand the historical context to properly interpret any text. I love history, and the history of English literature is a topic which is very close to my heart. It's very interesting, and I recommend that you listen to this as if you're listening to a story. If you wish to take notes, then you should watch this a second time and then take your notes. For the first time, just listen. I'll be diving deep into each of these periods in different videos. This is more like an overview. So, it all begins in the classical period or the Greco Roman period, which was roughly from 1200 BCE to 455 AD. Classical literature had little to do with English, but it shaped English literature. It is divided into three periods. It begins with the Homeric period or the heroic period. As you can guess from the name, it is the age of Homer. This is when Homer wrote his epic poems, Iliad and the Odyssey. They were passed down orally, so Homer didn't actually write them down. Next comes the classical Greek period. This is the era of Socrates, Plato, and some of the finest Greek playwrights like Euripides, Sophocles, and writers like Aesop. Next comes the classical Roman period. Rome conquered Greece in 146 BC. They began to rule Britain. So they had a lot of influence over the art and culture. One of the very famous kings of this period was Julius Caesar, and he was the dictator of Rome. The monarchy was again established by King Caesar Augustus. Some famous Roman writers include Ovid, Horace, and Virgil. Next comes the patristic period. This is the period when Saint Jerome first translated Bible into Latin, and that was called Vulgate. Christianity started to spread across Europe, and this is when the Roman civilization started to crumble. Rome was getting attacked, so they pulled the troops and sent them to Rome to defend their own borders. This left Britain vulnerable, and the local troops were weak. And this is when Britain was consistently getting attacked by the barbarians. So the Romans, under the rule of Constantine the Third, left Britain. The Anglo-Saxon period or the Old English period, which was 450 AD to 1066 AD. This was a turbulent period. So after the Romans left, different tribes were fighting amongst each other to take control of Britain. Three tribes of invaders took control of Britain. They were the Anglos, the Saxons, and the Jutes. These three tribes were sometimes at war with each other. So the literature of this era reflected that. It focused mainly on invasion and heroic themes. Beowulf was the most important work of this period. The Anglo-Saxon period ended with the Battle of Hastings. William the Conqueror became the ruler of England and established the Anglo-Norman period or the Middle English period, which was from 1066 AD to 1500 AD. William the Conqueror was from France, so there was a French influence in this era. The upperclassmen spoke French and the common class spoke English. Slowly, the French language mixed with the Old English, giving birth to Middle English. The French influence also brought with it the idea of feudalism and government. A centralized government was formed, and the idea of a nation developed in Britain. The literature of this period focused on romance and chivalry, and the idea of chivalry came from knights. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is one such chivalric romance of this era. The Middle English period can be divided into the Age of Chaucer and the Dark Ages. The name The Age of Chaucer is pretty self explanatory. Geoffrey Chaucer was the most influential writer of this period. He wrote the Canterbury Tales, which is an incomplete work, mind you. Coming back to history, this entire period was riddled with political instability. There was the Hundred-Year War, which lasted for 116 years. Edward II claimed the French throne, which resulted in a battle between France and England, and this was called the Hundred Years' War. This period also witnessed the Black Death, which resulted in the death of almost one third of the population. It was caused by flea bites with a bacterium. This plague came from Central Asia and spread to Europe through trade routes. A lot of people died and it caused a shortage of labor. So the government imposed heavy taxes and it resulted in the peasants' revolt. Explorers like Marco Polo, Vasco da Gama, and Columbus started their expeditions during this period. Then came the Dark Ages or the Age of Revival. These ages are running parallelly with the Hundred Years' War. So, yes, the Hundred Years' War is still going on during this period. And so, obviously, people didn't write much during this time, but global explorations were going on during this period. The War of the Roses between the House of Lancaster and the House of York for control of English throne was fought during this era. It concluded with the victory of Henry Tudor of House of Lancaster, and this started the Tudor dynasty, bringing us to the Renaissance period. Now we come to the Renaissance age, which was from 1500 to 1660 AD. The Renaissance first came in Italy, then it began in England. The Renaissance period can be divided into three periods. The first one is the early Renaissance or the early Tudor period. So Henry VII was succeeded by Henry VIII, who was famous for his long list of wives. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, gave birth to a daughter, and Henry had no male heir. So he decided to marry Anne Boleyn. So he was a Catholic and he wasn't permitted a divorce by the Pope. So Henry broke from the Church of Rome and declared himself the head of the Church of England. Anne Boleyn gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, and this resulted in her execution. Jane Seymour gave birth to a son, Edward, but she died during childbirth. Henry then married Anne of Cleves, Catherine of Howard, who was beheaded for adultery, and then Catherine Parr, who supported the Protestants. Edward VII ascended the throne and he was a Protestant, but his rule was short and he was a king for only 6 years. Then came Lady Jane Grey, his Protestant cousin, but she was queen for only 9 days until Mary the First ascended the throne. She was an astute Catholic, so she burned many Protestants, and it earned her the nickname of Bloody Mary. She bore no children, paving the way for her sister Elizabeth to be the Queen of England, which brings us to the Elizabethan period. The Elizabethan period is also called the Golden Age of English history. Art and literature flourished during this period. Queen Elizabeth was called the Virgin Queen. She never married and therefore she was the last Tudor. She was a Protestant, but her religious views were quite moderate. So there was peace between the Protestants and the Catholics. There was a period of peace during her reign. All the wars had stopped, and so people began to focus on more literary pursuits. And Queen Elizabeth supported the writers. She funded the university wits and she built public theatres. The university wits were a group of English playwrights educated at Oxford and Cambridge. Key members included Christopher Marlowe, Robert Greene, and Thomas Nash from Cambridge, and Thomas Lord George Peele from Oxford. Shakespeare was a prominent writer of this period. After Elizabeth, James the First ascended the throne, and it brought forth the Jacobean age. The literature produced in this age was somewhat darker than what was written during the Elizabethan period. James the First was a Protestant, but he was also pro Catholic, and during his reign, the King James Version of the Bible was published. After James the First, the Caroline period began as Charles the First ascended the throne. He suspended the parliament, which gave rise to a civil war. Under his reign, a group of poets called the Cavalier Poets emerged. They supported King Charles the First during the Civil War. Charles the First was beheaded. Commonwealth established itself and the Commonwealth period began. Oliver Cromwell came to power. He was a commoner. He wasn't the king, mind you. He was called the Lord Protector of England. Cromwell was a Puritan and believed that theatres and dramas were sinful. So he closed all theatres. John Milton was a Puritan and he supported Cromwell. After Cromwell died, Richard Cromwell, his son, came to power. But this nepotism didn't sit well with the people of England. They thought that a commoner shouldn't be in power, and if they had to accept someone's sons, they would rather accept the king's son. So Charles II claimed the throne, and the monarchy was restored, which brings us to the Neoclassical period. The Neoclassical period, or the Restoration period, or the Age of Dryden, which was from 1660 to 1798 AD. It's called the Restoration period because monarchy was restored and James II ascended the throne. He believed in an absolute monarchy and he dissolved the parliament. When William and Mary ascended the throne, they brought back the parliament. A constitutional monarchy was established during this time. The period saw tensions between the Whigs and Tories. Whigs were anti Catholic who wanted a parliament, and Tories were Anglicans who wanted the monarchs to have absolute power. Theatres were reopened with anti Puritan sentiments. This period is characterized by order, structure, and reason. Writers of this period sought to emulate the style of ancient Greek and Roman writers. Humans were portrayed as flawed rather than inherently good. Heroic drama, mock epics, and comedy of manners were common during this period. This period also has two divisions: the Age of Pope and the Age of Dryden. This period saw a lot of social development, urbanization, and a new class of people emerged called the middle class. They were somewhere in between the upper class and the lower class, which meant that they had disposable income. With the rise of the middle class, literacy increased. Periodic journals also emerged in this period, and there was a rise in coffee house culture. The middle class had money and education, so they spent their times in coffee shops where they met and they exchanged ideas. This is also the age of the novels. A lot of novels came out during this period. Writers like Daniel Defoe, Samuel Richardson and Afra Ben began to write novels. Drama witnessed a decline because of the Licensing Act of 1737, which gave Lord Chamberlain the power to censor and ban plays. Next, we have the Romantic era from 1798 to 1837 AD. The Romantic era was a shift to nature, emotions, and aesthetics. William Blake, Wordsworth, and Keats were major figures of this age. The literature in this era focused on perspective, inner sense, and individuality. This period witnessed the industrial revolutions. So people started to shift to cities. However, the cities weren't what they imagined it would be. It was clustered, confined, and polluted. So they became nostalgic about the countryside with fresh air and nature. It was a form of escapism. Slavery was abolished in 1833. Novels flourished during this period with writers like Jane Austen, Anne Radcliffe, and Walter Scott, who wrote many novels. Next, we have the Victorian era, which was from 1837 to 1901 AD. The Victorian era was the period when Queen Victoria ruled England. Many changes were happening during this time. Railways were built, engines were built, and people started asking for their rights. Darwin's theory of evolution came out, and so did Karl Marx's critique of capitalism. Serialized publications emerged, which were popularized by Charles Dickens. Some prominent writers of this time were Thomas Hardy, William Thackeray, Wilkie Collins, and Arthur Conan Doyle. Some poets of this period were Robert Browning, Alfred Lord Tennyson, and Elizabeth Browning. Next, we come to the modern period, which was from 1901 to 1945 AD. The modern period witnessed a lot: World War One, World War Two, and the Great Depression. As a result, people faced a lot of trauma and felt alienated. People were now disillusioned by traditional values, and all of these themes are explored in T.S. Eliot's poem The Wasteland. Modernism broke free from convention and moved towards fragmented, non linear narratives, subjective experiences, simplicity, and surrealism. Stream of consciousness writing emerged. Some prominent writers of this period were Virginia Woolf, Beckett, and Wilfred Owen. Next, we come to the postmodern period, which starts from 1945 AD and continues till date. This is the period after World War II. This period is shaped by the nuclear age, consumerism, and social media. Irony, metafiction, and skepticism towards authority are some themes of this period. Some prominent writers of this period are Derrida, Foucault, Salman Rushdie, Kurt Vonnegut, Sylvia Plath, and Philip Larkin. We live in a postmodern world, and this period continues. So, finally, we are done. We have covered all the periods of literature. I'll be deep diving into each era and discussing prominent literary works of that period from the next video onwards. So, if you liked my video, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next week. And we will start with the classical age and Homer. Toodles.